In this video, I will give a brief description for the Z-spring or double cantilever spring, as well as the procedure for fabrication of this spring. Let's start with the indications. The main indication for using the Z-spring is to produce proclination of an anterior tooth that is palatally positioned or retroclined, or it may be in a crossbite, anterior crossbite relation. So this is the main indication to produce proclination of this tooth and correct its position in the line of the arch. It can be used or may be used for correction of simple rotations that is less than 45 degrees. As you can see in this figure, the rotation of this tooth is less than 45 degrees. Description for this spring, as the name implies, the Z spring is bent into the shape of letter Z. It has an active arm, two coils, each 2 mm in diameter, and constructed in 0.5 mm stainless steel wire. The end of the active arm has a small loop or non-traumatic end, extend either from the mesial or distal aspect of the tooth. Then the first coil is bent above the active arm, as you can notice here. The first coil is above the active arm. Then the wire is directed again in a mesial or distal direction, and at the same mesiodistal dimension for the active arm, the second coil will be bent below the first coil. This configuration allows a better adaptation of the spring to the palatal surface. Then the wire will leave the second coil, and at the midpoint of the tooth, it will be bent in a palatal direction and leaving about 5 millimeters of the wire before starting your retentive tag. It's important also that the width of the spring will not exceed the mesiodistal width of the tooth. After you complete the fabrication of the spring, it's important that the spring is squeezed. The arms should be squeezed together. In this way, the range of action will be increased rather than when the spring is loose. Also, it should be adapted perpendicular to the long axis of the tooth. It should not lie flat along the palatal aspect of the anterior tooth. It should be perpendicular to the long axis. Fabrication of the Z spring or double cantilever spring. The first step is to draw the design of the spring on the dental cast. Working on the maxillary left central incisor. We start from the mesial aspect of the tooth by drawing the loop at the end of the active arm or the non-traumatic end, then moving distally, forming the first coil, then returning back to the mesial aspect for the second coil, then toward the mid point of the tooth, the wire will be bent in a palatal direction to form the retentive tag. First cut 5 to 6 centimeters of 0.5 mm stainless steel wire. First, I will make the loop at the end of the wire. Then I squeeze it between the two beaks of the plier. To make a very small loop at the end of the wire. Place the wire on the palatal surface of the tooth with the loop pointing gingivally, the head of the loop. Then mark the position of the first coil corresponding to the distal outline of the tooth or the distal contact area. Now I will hold the wire just before the mark, with the loop pointing downward. The loop is pointing downward. And I will start making the first coil, which should be bent above the active arm. Above the active arm. So this is the first coil. It is above the active arm. It should be tight, as you can see. The two turns of the wire should be, or the coil should be tight. It is above the active arm. The loop of at the end of the active arm is pointing gingivally. And those two arms are parallel to each other. Now mark the position for the second coil, just at the end of the loop. Now I will bend the second coil. The second coil should be bent below the active arm and below the first coil. Should be bent below the first coil. So this is the second coil. So the first coil is above the active arm, the second coil below the first coil. This will ensure that the spring will be of adequate vertical dimension. After bending the second coil, I will mark the area at which the wire will be directed palatally, exactly at the midpoint of the mesiodistal dimension of the tooth. I will hold the wire just before the bend, or slightly before the bend, with the correct orientation of the spring, and make a 90-degree bend toward the palate. A 90-degree bend toward the palate. The second step is to make the spring. The second step is to make the spring perpendicular on the long axis of the tooth. I will hold the spring and make this bend downward with a slight curvature for the remaining wire to adapt it to the palatal surface. Now I will squeeze the two coils with each other. This will increase the range of action of the spring. By squeezing the spring, I will increase its range of action. So now the spring is squeezed check it under cast. I will make the zigzag bend, leaving about 4 to 5 millimeters of the wire. Then start making the usual zigzag bend. Then I will cut the excess wire. The retentive arm should not cross the mid-palatal raphe, so I will make any necessary adjustment for the retentive tag. So this is the final result of the spring, or the final work. It's important that the spring is squeezed, the active arm below the first coil, the second coil below the first coil, and the spring is adapted perpendicular to the long axis of the tooth. And the retentive arm is away from the mid-palatal raphe.